to order. We have several presentations today. We're going to start out with Jason L. Kuby, President and CEO of Virginia Economic Development Partnership, and followed by Brian Horn, Director of the Department of Housing and Community Development. And we're going to talk a little bit today about the whole sites issue. As you know, the governor has put in significant amounts of additional money into business-ready sites. And we want to hear about that and what the money might be used for and where we might invest it. And with that, Jason L. Kuby, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. Good morning, members. Good to be with you today. I know you.
One thing first. I guess take the roll. Everybody here?
I'm here. Close enough.
Okay, there we go. We got three of us. We have a half a quorum anyway, but we're not voting on anything, so I think we're good.
Good. Well, thank you again, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, all of you. I'm going to move relatively quickly here. You've got some materials in your binder. I'll also keep it up on the screen. A lot of kind of information to cover in a short period of time about where we are in site development. This is an area where we've made a ton of progress over the last few years, thanks to the General Assembly, thanks to the administration. Just as a reminder, we have 5 big goals for economic development in the Commonwealth. The General Assembly has charged VEDP with developing a strategic plan for economic development for the Commonwealth. These are the 5 big goals. No big surprises here. You all have seen these many times. The main thing I want to emphasize is that site development is a critical ingredient to achieving all of these big goals. So it's really, really important as we think about where site development fits into our overall goals for the Commonwealth. As you think about the importance of having a project-ready site, it is for many types of projects, particularly for manufacturing projects and for industrial projects, it is indispensable. If you do not have a project-ready site, you will almost certainly get eliminated from consideration. You have to have a place for these kinds of projects to land. Having said that, I just want to contextualize that. It's one of several factors. I think you guys know that, but typically when we're dealing with a manufacturing project or an industrial project, the very first question VEDP gets asked is, send me a list of sites. We get that question before the workforce question, before the tax questions, before all the other questions that you can see here. Think of these primary selection factors on the left-hand side as the things we get asked, kind of towards the front end of the process, and the secondary selection factors as the things that come into play once a competitive economic development project has narrowed down the list of locations to just a small handful that are relatively similar on those primary factors. So it is a critical primary factor to site selection. Looks like you might have a question, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, I guess you address all these issues when you respond to their requests.
Yes, sir, we do, and typically it's a process where we get asked for a manufacturing project for sites first. Sometimes we get asked about the other factors up front, but it's kind of a narrowing where we get asked the big picture stuff first, and then it gets more and more detailed as we go along in the selection process. You've heard it before. It's cliche. We call it site selection, but practically speaking, it's more about a site elimination process. They're narrowing their list of options as they consider it. What you're looking at here is basically a breakdown of the direct jobs that have been announced for VEDP-assisted projects in Virginia over the last 5 years or so. You can see down the left-hand side, those are the different regions of Virginia. The breakdown of the jobs is by industry sector. So what I want to point out to you here, look at manufacturing, the dark blue bar. Look at agribusiness, which is sort of the yellow one. Most of those projects require a project-ready site. And the thing I want to emphasize here is that for the vast majority of Virginia's regions, this is a really, really important activity in order to cultivate the kinds of jobs that they are competing for. If we do not have project-ready sites, the vast majority of Virginia regions will not be competitive for a substantial share, and in many cases, the overwhelming majority of the projects that they are competing for today. On slide 4, what this shows is over the last 2.5 years or so, these are examples of basically high ROI greenfield manufacturing wins that Virginia has secured. So these are new projects to Virginia. These are not expansions where we have had a strong site option. And the thing I want to point out to you here is you can see across a range of geographies, a range of site sizes, Virginia is capable of winning projects if we have a project-ready site. And so, it's just to say, we need to think about this as a portfolio. We need to think about different geographies, different site sizes, different types of projects. Now, this is a fairly pretty picture that you're looking at here on slide 4. Slide 5 is the not so pretty picture. Slide 5 shows the opportunity cost of what Virginia is missing out on, in large part because we do not have project-ready sites for some types of projects. The biggest gap here, Mr. Chairman and members, is that Virginia has a very small inventory of large sites that are capable of accommodating very large projects. You can see because of the lack of project-ready sites, and I will say that some of this dates back to 2016 or so, when the Southern Virginia mega site at Berry Hill was not as advanced, and where the Maymax site near Emporia was not as advanced. But what you can see here is that since 2016, tens of thousands of jobs we've lost out on, more than $100 billion in CapEx, hundreds of millions of dollars in net new state tax revenue, lots of local revenue. You can see examples of the projects that have passed up on Virginia because of site issues on the right-hand side. So there's a big opportunity cost to not having the types of sites that we need to have for all types of projects, particularly for these larger projects. Now, that is where the biggest gap is. Big sites, and for many of these very large projects, they're looking for big sites in close proximity of large population centers, where you have a big workforce, where you have, a lot of infrastructure, where you have airports, et cetera. It looks like you might have a question.
Yeah. What is the acreage required to consider something a big site?
A big site, I would start at 250 acres, Senator Marsden, and I would say bigger is better, because sometimes you have a project that really does need a 1,000-acre site. It's going to be hard to find 1,000 acres. There's only a few places where we have industrial sites that are being developed 1,000-acre plus. So we need to look hard for those 1,000-acre sites, but we also need to look at 500 plus, 250 plus as well. So I'd say 250 plus is really where we need to look at expanding our inventory. And some folks might ask the question, hey, we're getting some nice wins on these mid-sized sites. Is it really that important to prioritize these big sites? I would say emphatically yes, it is important. I believe it is a must-win if we're going to achieve our big goals. And slide 6 tells that story. So let me just kind of walk you through this. So on the left-hand side of the chart, you're looking at manufacturing projects that have been announced in the southeastern United States in the last 4 years or so. So these are all the projects that we're aware of. We've estimated the site size that those projects landed on or required. You can see that only 4% of projects are looking for sites or landing on sites that are larger than 250 acres. It's only 4% of those projects that have required sites. But look at the right-hand side. That 4% of projects represents half of the total CapEx. Half of the total CapEx in that pie on the left-hand side is in that 4%, and about a third of the jobs is in that 4%. If you expand the scope a little bit to say, how much do 100-acre sites plus 100 plus acre sites matter? It's roughly 70% of the CapEx and 50% of the jobs. So small sliver of the total projects, massive percentage of the total economic opportunity that we're talking about.
So the message there is go big.
The message there is we need to go big if we want to achieve our big goals, but we also need an inventory that includes a variety of site sizes. And again, the big gap is on the big sites. VDP has developed a very rigorous system for evaluating the readiness of sites. This is going to be important because this ties to the Virginia Business Ready Sites program, which is the state's primary vehicle for investing in site development. Basically, you go from tier 1, or sometimes what we call tier 0, where it's basically just raw land, and advancing all the way up to tier 5, where you have a fully project-ready site. And you can see that in those early stages, we're mostly talking about soft costs. These are things like, getting it rezoned, getting it entitled, investing in due diligence, and then towards the latter stages of the process, you do encounter some hard costs. The idea here is to get sites to a level of development where construction of the facility can begin within 12 months or so of choosing the site. I'll often say 12 to 18 months of choosing a site. Businesses want to be able to begin construction on that sort of time period. So it's very important that the sites are developed enough to basically enable the businesses to meet the rapid timelines that they are working on. Slide 8 is just a little bit of history. We, Virginia, have come a long way in site development in a relatively short amount of time. Believe it or not, it was only in 2015 that the General Assembly first authorized VEDP to do a site and building program. We received money for that for the first time in 2018. It was a modest amount of money, about $500,000 per year. Just to put this in perspective, other states were spending tens of millions of dollars per year and have been for many, many years. The General Assembly made a transformational investment in many ways in FY19. That's when you provided VEDP the resources to fully characterize all of the sites that we knew about that were 25 acres or larger in our database. That ended up being close to 500 sites across Virginia. That was very important because it helped do a couple of things. One, it gave us a very clear intelligence on where our sites were in terms of their level of development, and it meant that it set the stage for enabling VEDP and the Commonwealth to invest very strategically if we had more money, meaning that we understood where the different sites were in their level of development, and we understood where we could make the biggest impact should we receive significant funds to invest in site development. In 2021, the funding went from $500,000 to $5 million, so that was a nice step. But again, we had a lot of catching up to do, and it was only very recently where we had substantial dollars in this activity. In the budget that you all approved last year, there was $159 million for site development. You know that at the beginning of last week, the governor announced $90 million in Virginia Business Ready Sites Grants awards. I want to explain how we got from 159 to 90. Basically, with the 159, there was $50 million that was contingent on FY22 revenues being ahead of targets. That is so that $50 million was taken out of that 159. That is the first $50 million in the budget that you guys are considering this session, and I'll come back to that. So 159 minus 50 is 109. $19 million was dedicated to the Lego project. So we dedicated those dollars to Lego. 109 minus 19 gets you to $90 million. That's the $90 million that we were able to award that was announced by the governor on Monday of last week. Let's talk a little bit about the Business Ready Sites program. So big picture here, Mr. Chairman and members, is that the General Assembly has provided the resources for Virginia to really begin catching up, and it's been a journey, and we're only really this year for the first time at a level where we really kind of need to be, and I would just say we need to ideally stay here kind of on a sustained basis and make this a regular part of how we think about our economic development budget, so that we have a sustained funding source at an appropriate level for investing in sites across the Commonwealth. Let's talk a little bit about the Virginia Business Ready Sites program. I'll be quick here because I think y'all kind of know about this program, but this is really about developing a portfolio of sites across the Commonwealth to position us to be competitive for the different types of economic development projects that we are seeing. There are basically two types of grants under this program. A characterization grant. So if a community says, hey, I've got this site. I don't really know a lot about it. I'd like to hire some engineers to figure out exactly where it is in its development, what needs to be done. We award a matching grant of $5,000 to accomplish that work. That's for sites that are 25 acres or larger. So the bigger money is in the site development grants, and that's where a community says, hey, we know where this site is in the level of development. What we really need is we need to hire some engineers to do the due diligence. We need to do some, we need to, help run the gas lines or the water lines or whatever. These funds can only be awarded to localities or other local government entities like RIFAs and so forth.
And this is just for the planning and the preliminary engineering work as to where the infrastructure would go and how it would be installed, that type of thing.
Yeah, it can be both. So we've primarily focused this money on soft costs historically, just because you tend to get more bang for your buck there. But in some cases, hard costs are necessary to put the sites in a position where they can win a project or where they can secure a project and begin construction within that 12 to 18 months timeline. It is a decision that we make within VDP, along with some third-party support. Ultimately, the award decisions are made by an investment committee. The governor has the ultimate authority for making these awards, determining where the money goes. So there's a lot of evaluation that happens within VDP with the support of third-party experts that do this kind of work nationally. Then we bring those recommendations to an investment committee that includes several leaders in the administration, several cabinet secretaries, and myself. And we evaluate those recommendations coming out of EDP. So that's the big picture on that. I would just say there's a number of priorities that we're trying to address with the Virginia Ready Sites program. I would say if I had a word for what these priorities are really intended to do, the word is impact. We're really trying to develop a portfolio of high wind potential sites, advance from those lower tiers to the upper tiers, while obviously having some geographic diversity and considering places where we can have regional and statewide impact. Slide 11 just gives you a little bit of an overview. There's a lot of words here. I won't go into detail, but suffice it to say that the process that we use to evaluate the grant applications we receive from communities is a very rigorous process. A ton of information is collected. We're collecting more than ever before, and that's because we've got some real money to award, and as a result, the localities are investing significantly in preparing for this process. We do virtual site tours, we do boots on the ground site tours with the third-party experts. We evaluate the investment opportunities with a rigorous ROI analysis, and we ultimately bring those recommendations to that investment committee that I was describing to you a second ago. On slide 12, you saw last week the $90 million award announcement coming out of the governor's office. That was $90 million that went to 21 different sites, just to kind of help you interpret those awards. That's what really slide 12 is trying to do here. So in thinking about what is that $90 million doing, it's really doing three big things. So first of all, about a third of it, 30%, is investments in 1,000-acre plus sites to help move them along. Most of those sites are going to take several years to make project ready. The only two sites in Virginia that are substantially project ready today are the Southern Virginia mega site at Berry Hill and the Maymax site near Emporia. Those are substantially ready sites. There are also sites that are not in close proximity to a large population center. So, that's kind of the competitive dynamic there, but they are substantially ready. We're seeing lots of bites at the apple, particularly at the Southern Virginia mega site.
Mr. Chairman.
But
Just a quick question on that. Who owns those development authorities?
Yes, sir. In the case of the Southern Virginia mega site at Berry Hill, it is a RIFA between Danville and Pennsylvania County. And on the Maymax site, do you know the owner?
I don't know if it's an EDA or a RIFA, but it's between Greensville and Emporia.
Yeah, so it's basically locally owned, sir. And Mecklenburg. Thank you, Senator.
Even though they're not contingent.
Yeah, so those are locally controlled, locally owned sites. So those are the ones that are. But I believe we're seeing a lot of at bats there. We're getting very close to the finish line, particularly on the Southern Virginia mega site. I'll come back to this, but a place where we need to put a lot of energy is thinking about how do we begin developing the next high quality project-ready mega sites, knowing that we're going to see more and more of these big projects, knowing that it's going to take us many years to get those sites project-ready. We need to get those sites in the pipeline, moving through the pipeline, and that's a big part of what we tried to do with these investments. So that's the first bucket. Yes, Senator.
How much of the money that was designated last year in the budget has been obligated?
Last year, well, out of that 159. When you say obligated, I think the answer is 109 million. So it's basically the 19 for Lego plus the 90, and then you have the 50 million that requires, I'm going to get the word wrong, but it basically requires you to reappropriate it because of the way the language was written.
When you're doing these evaluations, do you make any evaluation of how long it would take the Commonwealth to, I guess, recoup its investment and in terms of revenue, which is, I guess, the best way to measure whether something has been a good investment?
Yes, sir. We do a rigorous ROI analysis, and the timeline's going to vary a little bit depending on the nature of the site. But what we try to do is make sure that not only can we recover the investment in the site itself, but that we leave enough room in the ROI to also provide an incentive, because we know we're going to need to do that when we do have a project opportunity. So the timeline's going to vary somewhat.
Is there a range you try to hit?
Yeah. Do you guys know the sort of how to characterize the ROI range in terms of time?
So we look at a 20-year ROI for the project. We look at the break-even timeline, and then we also have a bear and a bull case. So we say if it takes longer than expected and it takes additional investment, do we still have the potential for a positive ROI on this site? And then in an optimistic scenario, what might be the return to the Commonwealth?
Yeah.
Those near-term ones, are most of those 3 and 4th tier?
On the near-term ones, yeah. So that's the second bucket. So that's where roughly 2/3 of the money went. So these are typically sites that are well in the VBRS program for most of the Commonwealth. The minimum site threshold for contiguous acreage is 100 acres. And I'll get this part of the answer to the question, Senator. In the Go Virginia regions 1 and 2, which is the far southwest and the Allegheny Highlands, 50 acres is the minimum threshold. These are these near-term wins. These are basically investments that we're making that will position these sites to be fully project ready within 1 or 2 years. These are sort of mid-sized sites, mostly 100 to 200 acres or so. Your question is about the tier level, Senator Ruff. I'd want to check, but I would say in general, this is about getting from wherever they are, whether it's a tier 1, 2, or 3, up to that sort of tier 4, tier 4.5 kind of status. So they will be project ready within 1 to 2 years. So the starting points vary a little bit, but we're really trying to get them all to project ready status within 1 to 2 years.
Moving forward, we started out with 150
Mhm.
last year.
Yes, sir.
The governor's asking for $450 million this year. What do you see and project to keep our momentum going? In the next few years, what kind of continued investment do you see being necessary, or does this cover us for a while and then we'll need to reappropriate in a few years?
Yeah.
Is this an every year thing?
Yeah, so really, really important question, Senator. I believe that for Virginia to be competitive for these kinds of projects, we need to invest in site development at a significant level on a sustained basis. There was $150 million in the budget that you approved last year for the Virginia Business Ready Sites program. I would say that we need to stay at that order of magnitude on a sustained basis over the course of time. If we do not do that, we are going to see the investments we make in those sites, they're going to be rapidly absorbed over the next couple of years, and we're going to get right back to the place that we've been in over the last several years. I will also say As you look at and it's a great segue to the budget that's under consideration this year. One of the things that we realized when we went through this process is that, one, we've got a lot of nice investment opportunities in what you might call mid-sized sites. These are those 100, 200-acre sites that you see throughout the Commonwealth. We can have nice wins in those categories in virtually every region. I would add some 50-acre sites when you get to the far southwest as well. So we can have some nice wins there. The other thing we learned, so we need to keep doing that, and that's why we need something on the order of the $159 million on a sustained basis. The other thing we recognized is that there are very, very, very few opportunities to develop the next mega site. Once we see a win at the Southern Virginia mega site at Berry Hill, once we see a win at Maymac, we are years away from getting the next mega site ready. So you look at the Coastal Virginia mega site at Chesapeake, you look at the Upper Magnolia Green site in Chesterfield County. Both of those sites have a lot of potential. Both of them need years of work to get to a project-ready status, even if we hustle. And so part of what this first bucket does is makes some investments to move some of those sites that are going to require some years of investment. It moves them along. But even as we do that, and we could run into some obstacles along the way that we can't fully anticipate right now, we need to really hustle to identify the next mega site development opportunities, and we need to take sort of a statewide approach to identifying the best ones.
You've talked about $150 million a year on a sustained basis. This year it's $450 million. Is that needed to do some catch-up kind of work, at that level, and then we can resort back to 150?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would say this is kind of a special year in some ways, and let me explain why. Let me explain the 450. So I'm jumping ahead. The slides I skipped basically provides details on where the $90 million goes. So you can see on slide 13 basically a map of where the $90 million went by site size, and then on slide 14 you can just see a breakdown of the sites in those three different buckets that I was describing to you a moment ago. That's what slide 14 is. Slide 15 gets to your question, Senator Marsden. So you basically ask, hey, I just said we need about $150 million on a sustained basis, and that's order of magnitude. But I would say order of magnitude, I'd say $150 million or so on a sustained basis in the Virginia Business Ready Sites program. I will also tell you that we need to think seriously, and we are thinking seriously about what do we need to do to identify and then cultivate those next mega site development opportunities. And so when you look at this $450 million, that proposal accomplishes both of those purposes. It invests significantly in the Virginia Business Ready Sites program. It would also position the Commonwealth to identify and then develop the next big mega site development opportunities. So let me break this down. It's a little bit. There's some details here that are important to catch. So let me just walk you through this on slide 15. So there's actually three pieces of this $500 million that's in the budget that y'all are considering right now. The first piece is the $50 million that was in the budget that you approved last year that required reappropriation now that the FY22 revenues have been recognized and are ahead of target. So that's the first $50 million. That is dedicated to the Virginia Business Ready Sites program. That's the grants program. And that's in FY23. There's another $200 million in FY23 that would be allocated between the Virginia Business Ready Sites program and a new program that is called the Site Acquisition Pilot Program. And the Site Acquisition Pilot Program is the name for this program that does what I just described, the process of identifying and then investing in a new mega site, or new mega sites, I should say. It provides some flexibility there. The proposed budget by the governor basically establishes an investment committee that would make the determination of how much of that 200 would go to VBRSP versus the new site acquisition pilot program. And then there's a third piece, $250 million in FY24, which is contingent on the Commonwealth meeting general fund revenue targets in FY23. That FY24 money, the $250 million, would be dedicated to that site acquisition pilot program. So the way that I think about this is you've got $50 million going into the grant program in FY23. You've got $200 million that could be split between the grant program and this new site acquisition program. I believe that in the early stages of that new site acquisition program, a lot of the effort would go into identifying the right sites, evaluating them. We would probably need to use some of that money to put those sites under option and to do the due diligence. I believe that to the extent that we find opportunities to actually purchase and develop a site, that would likely come out of the dollars that are proposed in FY24. So big picture, this is a proposal that would both advance Virginia Business Ready Sites program at a significant funding level in this next budget, and it would also provide the resources to do the identification and development of a one or more new mega sites.
I guess what that money would go for is sort of getting us caught up, and then the 150 thereafter would allow us to service those additional sites.
That's the way I think about it. I mean, I would say that we certainly, just kind of tying this all together, I think we do need to invest at a significant level on the order of $150 million in the Virginia Business Ready Sites program on a sustained basis. I also think we're going to need some significant resources to develop the next group of high potential mega sites in Virginia. I think once we go through this process, once we put these dollars to use, we're going to know a lot more about what's needed in future budgets for mega site development opportunities. So I think of this proposal as on the mega site side, on the new site acquisition pilot program, an important investment that is going to not only help us catch up, but help define what is needed in the future for that. And I think that's a little bit of a question mark right now in terms of exactly what's going to be needed in future budgets for mega sites in particular.
It's somewhat of a one-time expense to get us to that position, and then the 150 becomes an ongoing obligation to make.
Yes, somewhat of a one-time expense in the sense that we know we're going to need some significant resources to put ourselves in a position to be a capable and intelligent investor in mega sites in the future. Yes, sir.
Senator, on that $250 million, does that, the way it's drafted, does that lock you out of any options that you might want to fill in the business ready sites?
I don't think so, Senator. I think we have the flexibility that we need to be effective here.
Chair? Yeah,
Yes, sir.
question. Do we recoup some of the money when we invest in these sites by getting the businesses paying more than they would have paid if they had to develop the sites?
So the way that we're thinking about this is, first of all, we're as with the Virginia Business Ready Sites program, we are evaluating all of these investments through an ROI analysis,
Right.
considering both the site investment and the likely use of incentives when we're actually competing for a competitive economic development project. Most of the large manufacturing projects expect the site to be conveyed to them at little to no cost. So it's unlikely that we're going to, if we develop a mega site, it is unlikely that we will see sort of a direct return where we sort of sell the site. We would have to build that return into our ROI as we think about how we approach the deal. So the return would come over the course of time and not immediately on the front end.
All right,
Jason,
Yes, sir.
was that anything else?
go ahead.
Workforce,
Yes, sir.
folks to work, obviously it's a big consideration. Where are we in terms of some of our more promising sites, in terms of being able to generate the workforce to make projects? And I know these companies are looking at that, but what is your
I would, it's a great question, Senator. I would say, it's hard to kind of give you just kind of a quick answer to that question. I would say that, I mentioned to you for a manufacturing project, for an industrial project, typically the first question they ask is, do you have a site that will work for this project, and do so quickly? The second question they ask is the workforce question. Do you have the workforce to meet our needs? And, particularly in the labor environment we're in now, not just in Virginia, but nationally, that is on the minds of every business decision maker. Your question is, hey, are these sites, positioned in a place where we can solve for workforce? I would say it varies considerably by site. When we're looking at where to make investments in sites, that's part of our logic, if you will. We want to make sure that we're investing in sites that are of a size for a type of project where not only will you have the site, but you will also have the workforce. And I will say that the bigger the site, the bigger the project, the bigger the workforce concern becomes. And that is why, as we think about developing, mega sites, we're going to want to think about making sure that they're in reasonable proximity of population centers where there's a strong case for that.
We're hearing anecdotal kinds of evidence coming in, and it's just anecdotal, that there are large numbers of especially young men, not getting off the couch. Somehow the pandemic or something going on, in our society has sort of turned off the get to work engine, if you will. Does any part of this planning geared toward trying to reach people who are not really looking very hard at employment and getting them motivated, getting them energized to fill these jobs as they come up? Because our unemployment is low, but I don't think that reflects the number of people who just aren't in the game.
Yeah, Senator, it's a great point. The way I think about it is first of all, I think putting aside the very complex dynamics that you're describing, I think with respect to sites, I mean, our first thought is, are these sites located within reasonable proximity of a population center where you could see a project being successful, recognizing that projects come in a variety of different shapes and sizes. Now, you're right. There is a systemic issue that we're struggling with. Our labor force participation rate is down. We're looking at some migration patterns that are very concerning. I don't think there's a silver bullet to any of those. I think we need to break those different issues down, as you're saying. You've got young men that are not getting into the labor force. You've got folks that retired that might get back into the labor force. If employers were willing to provide the kind of flexibility that's going to get them in. There's people who care for children and older adults that are saying, hey, I could maybe work some if I could get some care for my aging parents or my kids. And then you've got folks who are saying, hey, housing prices here are getting kind of expensive. I need to look somewhere else. Military, I would say we need to take each of these segments and prioritize how to attack them, because you are absolutely right. There are some systemic issues that should alarm us in the labor market that we'll need to attack at the same time.
I assume you're working too with some folks, and we're going to have a presentation here in just a minute on housing to make sure that in an area where we're doing this usually involves people saying, hey, I'm willing to move 150 miles to get this job, but I need a place to live. And,
absolutely.
Is that part of
It is. I'm so glad you asked about that. But by the way, I would just say, I kind of ran through the litany of things that we need to get a plan around in the labor market. I would say that those are all things that we are working proactively to get in front of. Obviously, none of them have super simple solutions, but those are all things that we are working in partnership with others, including DHCD, to put more energy into. One of the places where I think we've had some of the best collaboration on site development as we think about the bigger picture is with DHCD, who you're going to hear from soon. June. Brian Horn and his team have been fantastic. We sat down with them and we said, look, here are the sites that we think have the highest win potential. We want y'all to start, working closely with us to think about what are the housing options that we need to think about. How do we make sure that we're aligning these different activities? I think that collaboration is as good as it's ever been, and we are, just going to continue to improve that so that these different activities that are related can be harmonized.
My last question, certainly the panel can ask other ones, but I've seen some, kind of interesting data presentations on, how business and business activity and travel is flowing towards places that have charging stations. That's going to become a bigger issue every year. Is that part of your planning, is to be able to provide that for these businesses and employees? Is that part of the infrastructure? Has there been any thinking there? I have a budget amendment for $25 million this year to start doing that in rural areas, which would encompass probably a lot of your sites. Would you be able to coordinate if we manage to get that kind of a budget amendment through to get these to some of our rural, areas there so that people aren't left behind or left out? That seems to be what's attracting businesses. And in Southwest and Southside, when they have their attractions, people aren't going to go to parks and trails and fishing and hunting and what have you. As more people use electric vehicles, they need to recharge.
Yeah.
Has that been talked about?
Yeah, we will absolutely coordinate. I singled out DHCD. They've been fantastic. You're going to hear from them. But I should add that one of the big things that we've done, part of what we need to do to develop sites and to advance our economic development competitiveness, part of it is the money. But part of it also is the coordination to make sure that we're doing all of the things that we need to do to be fully ready. And so this is not just a matter of investing money in sites. It's also about harmonizing this activity with housing. We've worked with DHCD and Virginia Housing. We're working very closely with DEQ. We're also working very closely with VDOT and DRPT. And so when you think about charging stations, they are at the table for us. We're meeting roughly monthly to review our site development opportunities with VDOT and DRPT and other partners, utilities as well, because all of this stuff needs to be harmonized. I suspect, Mr. Chairman, that in terms of charging stations and so forth, I think that would be mostly a VDOT. They would be kind of in the lead on it, but we're going to make sure that we're working closely with them to ensure that that is harmonized with where we see site development and other economic opportunities. I think that's what you're getting to.
I think it's just a question of making sure that you're kind of looking ahead to what some of the new issues may be in site development and
Totally.
not just what has traditionally gone into the thinking around what makes a great site to give us that
Absolutely.
extra advantage that we may need around housing and charging stations and
Totally.
different things, and working to perhaps develop a workforce that may not traditionally be living in those areas and being willing to relocate. Of course, that's up to the businesses and your talent accelerator program and all of that,
But yeah, the short answer is yes. That work is underway. I would say, like a lot of things with site development, there's a lot of catching up to do, but the collaboration is at a very high level, and it gives us the opportunity to harmonize some of these activities today, but also to look 10, 15 years down the road to make sure that we're preparing for the future that we're likely going to see.
Any other questions? Senator Hanger.
Just one quick question. I've served on the MEI Commission for several years, so I have some understanding of your calculations for return on investment. But like if you were to take a situation like the Berry Hill where you might get 2,500 jobs there, and we probably at this point you don't have 2,500 unemployed, employable people there. So you're going to have the local government's going to, as the population builds to provide those jobs, have to maybe build half a dozen new schools. Is that factored in?
Yeah, and yes, sir, it is, and we have worked really closely with the community on those sorts of things. In fact, with that particular site, one of the things that they've emphasized when we're competing for projects, they meaning Danville, Pennsylvania, is the investment that they've made in schools to prepare for this kind of opportunity.
They already have built extra capacity in their schools?
I can't speak to exactly the details. I don't know, Senator, if you want to try to address that, but They have emphasized that that they have invested significantly in schools in preparation for, you know, for growth. I'm not saying that they would tell you, hey, they're good to go, they've got enough. So I'm definitely not, I'm just saying that that is something that they are thinking about very seriously in terms of planning.
Mr. Chairman, I would add on that in any of these projects, there's a timeline. Construction costs, and hiring does not happen at the same time. So you build it into that. So the communities would have the ability to move along.
Yeah.
Being that there's a significant investment that was not calculated return on investment, it might be a dog chasing a tail.
Yeah, and I would just say part of what we try to do is not only look at the, you know, sort of the direct ROI, but what are some of the other expenditures that would likely be incurred with growth, so that we make sure that we're getting in front of those.
Mr. Chairman. Yes. I would just say, this is just an aside. I support the mission that you're involved with the site, but I have a built-in bias against government involvement in enterprise like this. Just from, at one point, I was on a task force with the National Conference of State Legislatures about how to deal with this, where we diffuse this competition between states. Now it's there. Got to deal with it.
Yeah.
That is the fact that the rest of the world is moving in this direction. And I suppose it creates somewhat of a level playing field.
Right.
But, yeah, I agree with Senator
Well,
Hanger. It seemed like
But,
the
but
old
just,
days.
just to put my total bias on the table, I mean, that's why some of, you know, like China and the Soviet bloc countries, they can do this better than we can because, you know, the government owns the tools of enterprise, and we don't do that. We got to be, in our country, capitalism, you got to be prepared to fail. And if we prop them up too much, you know, we're the ones that fail.
Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman, I would just add two things. One is I should point out to you that Chairman Barry Knight on the House side has a bill that would do something very similar to this site acquisition pilot program. So I just want to make you aware of that that's something that you guys may see, separate from the budget itself. The other thing I should just say is thank you. We you know, recapped some of the history today. We've come a long way quickly on this activity, thanks to your support, thanks to your leadership. So we would not be here without you guys. I think we've got an opportunity to really continue to catch up with what's been proposed. Really happy to spend some time with you and be happy to answer questions and meet with you all one-on-one separately, if that would be helpful.
Jason, we're all very proud of the work that's done at DED. You know, it's come a long way since some more difficult times. You know, we appreciate it, and you know, that legislatures sometimes have difficulty looking far into the future because of our eyes. You're our scouts out there, trying to make sure that you tell us where the trail is, and we'll try to follow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Greenfields.
Yes, sir.
How about brownfields? Doing anything worthwhile that businesses going back into those areas?
Yeah, there are a couple things that are worth mentioning. I would say, first of all, when it comes to brownfields, there's, you know, certainly some good things that are happening kind of below my radar at the local level. So I can't give you kind of a full account of everything, and in part because, you know, you have some federal resources that go into that as well. But I will say the state through VDP, it's a partnership between VDP and DEQ, has a I'm going to get the name wrong, but it's basically a brownfields restoration grant. It's a relatively small amount of money, I think $2 million or so per year. You know, about $2 million per year. That it works in a similar way to the Virginia Business Ready Sites program, where localities apply and we work with DEQ to make awards. We've had a lot of nice redevelopment opportunities through that program over the years. It's not a kind of a mega site program. It's typically, I believe it's fair to say, it's typically stuff that's within, you know, sort of a municipality where folks are trying to, you know, redevelop, you know, an old gas station or something like that. And just looking for a nod to make sure I'm describing this right. So yes, there is some good work happening there, Senator. But it's, you know, again, it's you know, very, very targeted to these, you know, kind of individual property needs that we see typically in municipalities across the Commonwealth.
Mr. Chairman, I would not think that it would be service stations. I would think it'd be old manufacturing
It's some of that as well.
All right. Jason, thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Great presentation. We appreciate it, and we'll let you get back to work and go get some wins for us.
Yes, sir. Thank you for the time. Thanks for the support. Thanks to all your colleagues as well.
All right, thank you. Next up, Brian Horn, who's the Director of the Department of Housing and Community Development. Brian, come on up to the table here and welcome.
Welcome. Thank you. I get to follow Jason. Good. All right. First of all, good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to brief the subcommittee. I'm Brian Horn, the new Director of Department of Housing and Community Development. I brought with me my crack team of expert witnesses, who I might call on if I need to, but I'd just like to thank you, Chair Marston, and the other committee members for all the support that DHCD has received in the past. It's a great team, and it does good work. So I understand the subcommittee requested that we provide an overview of the Housing Trust Fund and then the Low-Income Energy Efficiency Program. We'll definitely provide that today. We've also included some overviews on broadband and economic development if we have time and there's interest. So let's start with the Virginia Housing Trust Fund. Virginia Housing Trust Fund, oh, yeah, right here. Okay. The Virginia Housing Trust Fund does two things. It creates new housing units that are affordable, and it preserves new housing units that are affordable. In affordable housing, we talk a lot about area median income, not average, median. And so you'll hear definitions of affordability and workforce. Okay. To give you an idea, affordable housing generally is at 60% area median income and below. Workforce has been defined by some as between 80% and 120%. So you can see there's two different levels there. After that, you get into market rate. So the focus of the Virginia Housing Trust Fund is affordable housing. So it's in that range. It also, in addition to housing, we also use it to help prevent homelessness, and we'll break down the percentages here in a second. But the fund is 10 years old. It's administered by DHCD. And what we do is the actual program name that we use those funds in is called the Affordable and Special Needs Housing Program. Now, through 2022, we've created or preserved over 10,000 housing units. I frankly expect that to go up. I'll explain why a little later. But one of the things you were just talking to Mr. Okubi about is the coordination we've been undertaking with VEDP and Virginia Housing, and they've both been great to work with. VEDP really sees the need for housing and how it's linked to economic development, so that we're aligning those. Another thing to kind of understand about housing is it's government programs surrounding affordable housing tend to be reactive. That is, there's no eminent domain for housing. The state does not go out, acquire land, and build housing, kind of like VDOT acquires land and builds roads. Okay, so it's reactive in the sense that a project needs to arise in the field, and the developer come and apply to the programs for assistance. Now, if I'm going to build an affordable housing development, let's say a large multifamily rental, I'm going to look at different sources. I'm going to go not only to my own capital, I'm going to go to Virginia Housing, for instance, try to get low-income housing tax credits. They can also go to DHCD for gap financing to help build that capital stack up and be able to, in the sense, afford to be able to create or preserve the affordable housing that people can afford to live in. And so we're really excited and frankly really hopeful about this alignment with VEDP and being able to identify where a new site's going in. How can we help solve the housing issues that are going to arise with new jobs, and do that ahead of time rather than wait for the facility to be built. So getting into the details, Virginia Housing Trust Fund, break it up into two buckets. The first bucket's bigger. It's 80% goes towards low interest loans to support affordable and special needs housing. Again, I mentioned the capital stack. This is not just the only source of assistance for building affordable housing. It leverages private investment as well. So in 2021 to 2022 alone, leveraged $1.2 billion in private investment, which is a 30% to 1 ratio. The other 20% is used in the form of grants in the fight against homelessness. And to date, through 2022, we've been able to assist 2,185 households, i.e. families. And those grants go to homeless service providers to help address that issue. Now, I'm going to go ahead and go chronologically in terms of the budget allocations, and I'm going to frame it in the sense of the rounds that we have operated in affordable and special needs housing. The prior round, which you'll see on slide, I think it's 6, I can't read that, 2021 to the 2022 year. In that year, $55 million was appropriated. Okay, 80% of that's $44 million. In our grant round that year, we had 105 applications, and that asking approximately $660 million in requests. Now, I will note in the slide, and we'll provide a corrected one, there is a typo where it says 42.1, that's actually 43.9. Kendra will get you that. And you may recall in July of this year, $27 million was announced for 34 projects. That's part of that. That's part of that particular round. Now, moving forward to the current round, which is 2022-2023, the budget is appropriated $75 million. We're going to have a round in March that should close in early April. And then moving forward to the governor's proposed budget, continues this support with $75 million each year for 2023 and 2024. For 150 for the total biennium. Now, I mentioned that I expect we would see a growth in the number of housing units. I can tell you that's 2 reasons. One, we will have more money to distribute and to work with, but also in the past, and I don't really foresee an end to this, is the program has been oversubscribed. More often than not, even with a scored round, there are still projects that could have been funded that weren't able to be. So that's why I frankly think the number will go up. Moving on to the Housing Innovations and Energy Efficiency. That is the name of our program for the low-income energy efficiency work that we do. Now, this program's funded through the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. Virginia receives, DHCD specifically, 50% of these proceeds per statute. And so the way we're using them is in 2 different programs. Weatherization deferral, and we also run it through the Affordable and Special Needs Housing Program for soft loans to developers. So let's talk about weatherization and deferral. This past year is $45.2 million. These are grants that go to weatherization providers, that is contractors who go in and help weatherize homes. That saves people on their utilities. And they're basically upgrades that aren't typically covered by federal programs. For instance, I don't believe fixing a roof is necessarily covered by a federal program, but we're able to cover where the federal government does not. And then at that point, they're able to be eligible for federal weatherization funds. So, and just in terms of numbers, 265 projects have been completed. We've approved 491, and that serves so far 699 housing units that we've been able to weatherize. In terms of affordable and special needs housing, that number this year is $108.3 million. Now, developers apply for these funds along with there are other funds in affordable and special needs housing. Again, these are done by scored rounds. These are aimed at energy efficiency upgrades. And we've done 32 projects to date with over 2,600 units that will be more energy efficient. Next round for that is also going to be March of this year, which will close in early April. Moving on to the Hurley flood relief. The HCD was directed in the budget last year to administer $11.4 million in funding for the Hurley flood relief program. The HCD's never done one of those before. Basically, we created kind of a FEMA light program, and we did it in conjunction with the Buchanan County DSS. When this flood happened back in, I believe it was August of 2021, there was an immediate reaction by FEMA and DSS and players in the Buchanan County to gather information, and we were lucky in the sense that Buchanan County DSS already had a lot of information with respect to people's homes. And so with that, in an attempt to make it as easy as we can to apply and still meet the requirements of the budget amendment that impose fraud controls and other requirements on us. We partnered with Buchanan County DSS, developed the guidelines. I have to acknowledge the great help that Buchanan County DSS has been, both in guideline development but also processing. We'll get to processing numbers in a minute. But I also have to acknowledge the great help and support we've gotten from Senator Hackworth and Delegate Moorfield. They've been along with us the whole way on this journey. So that 11.4 million, we've so far gotten, when I say we, I mean Buchanan County DSS through this program has received 88 applications. That was as of Friday.
Is this to repair homes that were damaged?
This is to provide relief for people that suffered damage in the flood, and the specific answer is yes, and some other things. So the way this program is set up, if there is a complete loss or major loss, which is basically structural damage identified by a building inspector, then the compensation is a percentage, 175% of the assessed value. Okay. If it's, let's call it minor damage, I hate using that term because damage is damage, but if it's less than major, then we look at repair estimates. If the homeowner has already gotten things repaired, receipts to compensate them for what was repaired. So in direct answer to your question, it functions like kind of like flood insurance policy, in that if there are repair costs, it would pay towards the repair costs, but if you suffer enough of a loss, it pays it. It's like a total loss.
With homes that are in the flood's path, do you ever just say, look, we're just not going to invest in something that's likely to be flooded again? Do you, require people to relocate, or?
No. The budget amendment was well written. There's a lot of detail in it, and it provides just for the compensation. So we don't. It's not like some programs that require purchase or.
Senator Hanger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the current budget request, there's another roughly 11 million proposed. Yes. Is that to flow through because you're oversubscribed, or a different area where it will be handled through the same model?
Okay. In answer to your first question, it covers the Buchanan, Tazewell, basically the Whitewood flooding that happened in 2022. And so we anticipate that and again, that's in the proposed budget, if that remains, we anticipate we'd handle it similarly, like we have with the Hurley flood. And again, looping in local government, looping in actors there to get that support, especially for pre-collected information, but basically adopt the same guidelines. Obviously, we're constantly looking at our guidelines, and if there's some best practices we need to adopt and some adjustments we can make it to both programs. So we received 88 to date. DHCDs received 29. We've approved 23. We have 4 more pending that I think we'll be able to get out the door later this week. But it's you're looking at a total of 2.73 million paid to date, and the remaining applications are at DSS currently in process. Let's see. Now, at this point, I can move forward and talk about some things like broadband and the rest. So broadband, in Virginia, broadband's covered by the Virginia Telecommunication Initiative. It's also known as VOTI. You'll hear a lot talked about it. At the risk of being facetious, VOTI's all about putting internet where it's not. Okay, it's about serving the unserved, and an unserved location. Not just individuals. Unserved location is one that cannot, within a reasonable time or cost, hook up to broadband. So what VOTI has done is funded broadband construction projects to reach folks that aren't already served. If you can imagine, a lot of service that exists currently, especially in urban areas, is through your cable companies. And so much of the work in VOTI is in suburbs and, frankly, rural areas to be able to hook folks up. The program receives right now in the current budget $49.7 million per year. And this year, in our current round, which we've yet to make the award decisions, but we have under review, we received 33 applications that totaled $300 million. You might remember I think it's December. It was December of 2021. About 700 some million was announced in terms of awards, and those awards were made. The contracts are, I believe, all executed with the exception of maybe one that needed some additional State Corporation Commission work. But those contracts are, when I say contracts, I mean contracts with localities who then contract with the internet service providers. And the construction timeframes for those contracts, 24 to 36 months. And it involves more, in some areas, you're going to be looking at ditching and excavation. In other areas, you're stringing them along power lines. And so there are different issues, different challenges for each of the types of projects. But it's a 24, 36-month process for those.
Yesterday
Yes, sir.
in Commerce and Labor, we listened to sort of a dispute between the railroads and the broadband providers about crossings.
Yes.
And the expense that the railroads have to go through, plus the compensation they want for the use of their land. Do you have any comment on
No,
that and how that's impacting your work?
Certainly. We're definitely tracking that bill. So you can imagine, railroads, have property rights along their rail line. And so we, in order to cross over them, either under or above, we do have to secure contractors have to secure the rights. In terms of the bill, I mean, I'd have to check in the administration if we have a position on it or not. But that's the practical impact. And whenever you're crossing anything, it's going to involve some sort of cost. Whether it's a natural boundary or a natural border or someone's property. Go ahead.
Well, just to update you, we didn't really solve anything yesterday. We moved the bill forward, and are hoping that they will continue to work on this and resolve it, because otherwise it appears it's heading to court. And if it gets into court, that's a delay, and that's not something that anybody wants. But it's a vexing problem. At any rate, please continue.
No, absolutely.
Did you want to comment?
Yeah, I think we just wanted, for the ARPA funding, that all the broadband awards were made. So the rules right now is we had to obligate the funds by 2024, but we have until 2026 to spend them. So we're still about 2 years out on that. So just in terms of like how that bill may affect things.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Kristen. All right, so part of another one of the broadband programs we operate is called the Line Extension Customer Service Program. It's affectionately known as LECAP. That is designed to help hook folks up who have a long drop issue. Now, what that means is that certain locations have a long distance from the line to the building. Let's say it's an apartment complex or a home. Okay, in Southside and other agricultural areas where homes aren't necessarily set next to the road, you run into this. And this is designed to help folks afford to actually connect. And we have $8 million in the fiscal year 2022 and 2023 budget. Again, these are all ARPA dollars, like Kristen mentioned. And right now, we've received 228 applications. 77 were eligible. 23 are currently under construction. 25 have already been completed, actually. And the remainder are in process, just waiting on cost estimates. And what this does, this helps folks who low to moderate income connect to the internet, not just with VADI getting the line to where they could have access. This helps them actually achieve connection and access. Next up, two different statutes requested that we create some tools for folks to be able to use to take a look at what internet and broadband means for them. One's the broadband availability map, and the next is the VADI project dashboard. So the broadband availability map enables, and I'll back up. It's a really, really powerful tool. There's a lot on that website, and there's a lot you can do with it. It's designed to be used by citizens, but also by internet providers and people in the space. It enables you to see current VADI projects. That necessarily mean you're connected yet, but to see if you're in a current VADI project, and also see where, I believe we also covered, Doc, the not just this past December 2021 batch of awards. How far do we go back?
January 2021
Okay. All right, so we have full year coverage from that. And that enables you to see if you're in a project area and that it's coming. Okay. Flip around to the dashboard. It tells you where you are with respect to a particular body project. And a lot of different metrics on that. It was intended to be really user-friendly in that the use of graphics and dials and the like, so you can see where that project stands. And it even breaks it down on the page to various phases of the project, whether it's design, permitting, and actual construction. We've been able to get some usage traffic or some traffic numbers. So far, the map's gotten about 9,500 hits. And the dashboard, which just went up fairly recently, which is I guess September, has already gotten over 6,200 hits. So people are using it. And it's all part of this bigger picture that we're working on with respect to federal money. And I'll make a nod before we get into the discussion about the BEAD Act and upcoming federal money. Right now there is a challenge process underway with the FCC map. Federal Communications Commission already has its own map. And last year we and others heard complaints that it overstates or at times could overstate availability based on how that map would calculate availability based on census tract. Part of our challenge is aimed at so that we can maximize and get as much as we can from this new program that's coming up through the Infrastructure and Investment Jobs Act. That's BEAD. So if you want to take a step back and look at broadband in terms of funding over the past few years, what really stands out is that $700 million that flowed out in 2021. So this year, 49.7, next year, 49.7, subject to whatever we are able to secure out of the BEAD program. Now, that stands for Broadband, Equity, Access, and Deployment. I'm not trying to be cagey, but that program has yet to announce its formula, has yet to announce what Virginia is going to get. Under the statute, every state gets a floor of $100 million, but it's not like we got a check for $100 million. Okay. What we're going to get, if any, above that floor is going to be figured on a formula that, again, has not been announced. What we are currently underway with is planning. And we have a planning grant to the tune of $5 million that we're planning what Virginia plans to do with BEAD funding. BEAD funding is more than just deployment. It also has some affordability elements. And there's one other thing that I always note to folks. It's also limited to fiber. Okay, so whereas the state money provides us flexibility, some areas of, for instance, a fixed wireless or other sort of non-fiber project makes sense and has been deployed. The BEAD money is only strictly fiber, so we definitely appreciate the flexibility the state money gives us. There's also the Digital Equity Act, which talks about it's going to be planning and implementation for affordability. That's $1.2 million to Virginia, and the governor's named AHCD as the lead agency on the broadband programs. So we start with 100. There'll be some money above it. I would be repeating hearsay, but I'll do it anyway. Senator Warner has talked about figures in the 800s. Don't know still to this. We do not, as of this point, have a good figures where we're going to be above the 100 million. But that's the order of magnitude we're looking at. So we had 700 some 2021, 49, and then BEAD when that comes out, because the federal government operates on a separate or a different fiscal calendar than we do. I'm not going to try to predict when we'll get that money, but the longer we go in the current state, the farther out that's going to be.
Mr. Chairman, just on the federal money,
Yes.
in the past, federal money sounded better than actually it was, because when they quoted the number, it was like over 10 years, and then there were lots of red tape associated with it. Would this be like a big lump sum up front, or how?
That's a good question, and that's one we would have, and we would love to find out. I mean, it's
Right.
again the actual formula and the planning. It's kind of going on at the same time the plane's flying. So, but once that's certainly something we can follow up with once we get more information. We'll be briefing a lot of people once we get more information on BEAD.
Interrupt while you stop. The inaccuracy in the map.
Yes.
How many complaints were there that was inaccurate, it proved to be true?
Okay. Initial complaints as to the FCC map, I really don't have figures on. I don't think we do. However, I'm going to kick it over. I'm going to call my expert witness, Dr. Holmes. Would you feel free to speak on our current, because we are currently challenging the FCC map, are we not?
Yes, so Senator Ruff, we did submit, so for the first time in the history of FCC mapping, both individuals could submit challenges and the states could as well. And so the Commonwealth of Virginia submitted 3 types of challenges. We submitted a challenge of over 200,000 locations based on providers submitting to the FCC, but not submitting to our state map. Plug, thank you very much for the funding for the state map. We were able to utilize that to challenge the FCC. The second bucket of challenges was 1.6 million locations were challenged. That's because 3 major cellular providers somehow in Virginia claim to be cellular providers, but on the FCC map claim to be fixed wireless providers. Therefore, they don't currently report to our state map. So 1.6 million were challenged under that bucket. The last bucket was, as Brian talked a little bit earlier, about the line extension program. And so we challenged over 100,000 locations based on the fact that the FCC defines a location as unserved if you have to pay special construction costs. We also define that as unserved. There were about 100,000 locations that were provided to the FCC as served. Providers saying they can serve them, however, the families have to come out of pocket, so those are not considered served. So about 2.2 million addresses were challenged by the Commonwealth to the FCC's map.
Thank you.
I'd like to move on now to economic development programs at DHCD. I'll start with Go Virginia, the Growth and Opportunity Fund. To date, Go Virginia has been one of the state's most impactful regional economic development programs. It boasts the creation of over 21,000 jobs, including over 2,000 new internship opportunities and 7,800 newly credentialed workers. Go Virginia is a special program. It's got a board that is made up of business leaders, government leaders as well, and basically reviews and approves projects as they come up through the various regions. I believe I'm on slide, was that 15? I can't read that. 19.
We have full finance taking off at 9 o'clock here, so if you can go through and hit the highlights.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So the big news out of Go Virginia right now, let's talk about Talent Pathways. I'm going to go ahead and plug that program. The focus there is aiming at addressing the workforce issues that the state faces, and we've broken down the various numbers as to where it's going, especially the biopharma cluster is getting significant attention, both with respect to the Virginia Partnership Authority and UVA's Institute, as well as the City of Roanoke. The Industrial Revitalization Fund, you may have heard of, is where we take vacant buildings and through IRF grants are able to rehab them and get them working again in different capacities. We have the statistics for that. Virginia Main Street's another program that helps revitalize downtowns, and it's been quite successful. It does a lot with a little money. It had $500,000 in the state general fund annually so far. Also gotten an additional plus up with some ARPA funds to the tune of $8 million, and we've given to statistics there as to the benefit it has provided. Last but not least, we have the budget amendments. We've talked about the Whitewood flood relief. Go Virginia, we do have 3 additions there, both Talent Pathways, but also $1.3 million for the board to work with VDAX to address workforce needs in agricultural technology industries, and then an additional $10 million for specific projects. And then last but not least, Virginia Main Street's also received some additional money, $2 million increase for the budget, with 1.5 earmarked for high impact projects in the Crater Planning District. And the Housing Inspection Program, that's a pilot, $10 million can be routed through DHCD to provide assistance to localities who are running into bottlenecks with building permits. And so that will enable them to hire temporary help as needed to help cut through the backlog, because when it comes to housing, time is as valuable as money, and delays cost money. And that concludes my presentation to the panel.
Well, thank you very much. What are your biggest needs right now in terms of, you're in front of the Finance Committee, and you know, you've taken a look at probably the budget amendments and the governor's budget and what have you. Would you be able to speak freely to let us know what your needs are?
Well, I fully support the governor's budget, and I think, but we definitely acknowledge the oversubscription with the Housing Trust Fund, and in the sense that we still continue to get more projects with more asks. But I think all of that's being considered. I think. Obviously, once the budget has to get through its process, and we're going to support that. I think that's what I can.
Okay. I know I've put some additional funds in for.
Yes, you have, and we're thankful.
For Housing Trust Fund. Senator Hanger, Senator Ruff, any other questions or comments?
You fully staffed? You could be short.
Actually, there's the mail, and then there's actually being able to find folks. It's. My team has worked very hard for a while, very leanly, and we're staffing up and identifying areas where we can staff up. But it like all businesses and other institutions, finding the workers is harder.
What is your mail?
I believe, Kristen, correct me if I'm wrong, we're at 230. It's like 236, 238, 241 authorized.
Well, anything that comes to mind that you need or you want to do, please contact members of the committee. That's
Definitely will.
what we're here for. We rely on information, in terms of making decisions. If not, we're left to our own devices. So other than that, is there anything else that we need to go over? Kendra, thank you for putting this all together. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for the opportunity and for the support that you've had for the agency.
And with that, the committee will rise. Thanks so much.
Senator.
All right.
Yeah, turn that thing off before it says something stupid.